Hello, this is the Artful Wizard, and I'm glad that you could join me for another adventure in art. And actually, this is a continuation from last week's pencil drawing of Judge Dredd. And in this one, I do go in and fix the arm and do some line work with some fine liner pens, and then play around with some inks and brushes. And this week, I'm going to, as we watch along with the art, I'm going to talk about the art, my process, and a little bit more about the character inspiration. And as my general motto goes, let's just kind of see what happens. So, as I mentioned in last week's video, talking about Judge Dredd, and my first experience with the character was the movie with Stallone, which is cheesy but fun. And from the movie, my next experience was there was a video game. A few years after the movie, I think it was on PlayStation 2 of all things, and it was like a first-person shooter. I remember it being quite fun, and you had little side missions to where you could arrest people for graffiti or using vulgar language or whatever, and they get to spend like a week in the side cells. But as of reading the comics, it was years after being introduced to the character that I was able to read the comics because of general availability. Getting access to those books was kind of hard, mainly because they were British comics. We could get them here, but they were less. You were definitely getting your Marvels and your DCs over your 2000 ADs. But there was some American produced Judge Dredd comics, I think by IDW, but they were still harder to get, and especially if you didn't have a brick and mortar shop in your town, getting a hold of comics whenever I was a kid was kind of hard. You would probably find them at a swap meet or a yard sale if you're looking for old comics. But we did have a few stores in my area, but they didn't last very long. They were in and out. And then even whenever the comic selection in there was not that great. And I found some nice gems. I'm definitely someone who collects to read, so I have a whole collection of Conan comics. But most of them are missing covers or in really bad condition that I got for like a quarter or 50 cents at most. Some of those were a dollar, but you found gems here and there. But I ended up reading the comics later on digital, years later, before watching the Carl Urban movie, but after the video game. And I started doing research on the character, after watching the movie, and trying to find those comics. But as the talking about the introduction being the movie, the real introduction was that I mentioned in last week's video was RoboCop, because RoboCop, other than the Alex Murphy backstory, is predominantly Judge Dredd. Even Paul Verhoeven's satirical take and comedy, and the "I'll buy that for $1" guy, like all of that is very much in line with the satire from the Judge Dredd comics, being that they were very dark and brutal satire. And so like RoboCop really gets that. And Paul Verhoeven, he also did something very similar. That same whole concept in Starship Troopers. So like if you take Starship Troopers and add RoboCop, then you have Judge Dredd, which it would make more sense if Paul Verhoeven actually did direct the Judge Dredd movie with Sly Stallone. So it probably would have been better. Um, yeah, and yeah, he did, I think he did something similar in Total Recall with the cats on Mars. With the oxygen keeping it from the people's. But I don't think he did that in Showgirls. No, no, I definitely don't think he did that in Showgirls. But now I just want to watch Saved by the Bell. Hmm. Well, back to the art. So in this piece, I was definitely trying to practice cross hatching, and as a artist, it is I think one of my weaker points. Um, yeah, I think it's one of the hardest things to do because you have to get your line weight down and your spacing, and then getting your angles down so you can fill in those grayscales. And but with anything that you have a problem with is practice it, keep doing it over and over again. So um, how I work is that I generally don't do practice drawing in the general sense. A lot of people sit and draw hands over and over and over again. I like to design art pieces around things that I'm working on. Like, if I'm wanting to work on anatomy, then I'm going to work on trying to do like figure drawing. And something that would be more predominant, like if I wanted to do work on how an arm looks, I'm going to put the arm in the front, like I did kind of with this picture here. But I really wanted to lean into the cross hatching because some of the original art done in the Judge Dredd comics was this stark black and white, because they did black and white comics for a lot of those 2000 ADs, and that style of just black and white and cross hatching is what I was trying to lean into. What were all my inspirations for this character? Looking at the original art and the movies and the video games and the things that I'd taken in, for my own interpretation. But as of the cross hatching, like I said, this is something that I keep trying to practice over and over and over again. And that's, as artists, if you have any inkling of wanting to do art, that's what you really have to do, is just continuously go and try things. Find something you're interested in and take inspiration from other artists and just try it and see what happens. And keep working at it and keep working at it and just keep doing it. And eventually you will get better and you will start to pick up, or you will start to notice the things that you're doing wrong. You don't compare yourself to other artists, but look at other artists and see how they work. Um, as of like Frank Frazetta. Frank Frazetta could do an entire piece of nothing but cross hatching, and it was absolutely beautiful. His work, to where there's really no lines. It's just hatching, and he would the anatomy of some ancient warrior or something. So just look at like other artists and see what techniques they use, and maybe implement that into yourself. And which it's what I try to do. And actually, on that, with black and whites and inks, Jim Lee, watching Jim Lee a lot, he uses blotches of ink and whiteout to accent either highlights or clean up lines, or build background lighting, which is kind of what inspired what I'm doing here. Though this is kind of a cheaper paper, and I come up on the issue of when I wanted to go lay in the whiteout and the highlights, because I'd love to fill this background in. but the paper started shredding up, and I just wanted to leave it alone because there was a lot of ink on the page. And because but I do like the idea that he's in this black room. Like, what's the story behind it? Like, he's come up on this, like, this drug deal or some sort of weapons deal, and he's in this warehouse and he's run up and they've shined a light at him, so like he's pitch black behind him and he's just lit up. So I mean, that's what I was trying to see with this. And speaking of art supplies, I mean, you really get what you pay for. In this I used a Micron and some Prismacolor liners, and some just I can't even remember the brand of India ink. But the products you use are better. You get what you pay for. But also, you don't have to have the most expensive thing to do art. Use what you can find and then save up and do, get what you can. But I appreciate everyone hanging out with me and enjoying the talk. And hopefully I've educated you a little bit on the history of Judge Dredd and your interest in finding out more about the character. If you already knew about Judge Dredd, hopefully I entertained you, and hopefully you liked the drawing. Follow me on Twitch, Instagram, and if you want to support me, you can support me on Patreon. I'm going to put those links up at the end of the video. And keep arting. You guys have a wonderful day.